Welcome to First Principles, the Ken's fortnightly leadership podcast. I am Rohin Dharmakumar, your host. First of all, if you're a new listener to this podcast, then I really think you've clicked on the right episode. And if you're a long-time listener, thank you by the way, then you might know that here at First Principles, we have a few favorite questions. And we try and ask these questions to most of our guests. The most interesting part of this is that every guest has a vastly different answer to the same question. Their age, experience, outlook on life, even their co founders or their family play a significant role in how they answer our questions. Take motivation, for example. What drives founders and CEOs, even when things aren't looking so good? It could simply be untamable perseverance.
And that today is, I think, my single biggest advice. It sounds like a, monotone. I keep saying the same thing like a repeat to people, to youngsters, is that just hang in there. Don't give up too early. Because so many businesses haven't seen the light of day because someone gave up too early. And it's not only my story. I remember,
It could be other people.
For example, or people who have grown up with you in your teams, and you sit back and say, wow, I mean, this person has transformed in 4 5 years, or this person has completely. And I think that gives you that satisfaction to come back again and say, how many more heroes can you create?
It could even be a book.
NPS was minus 27. And that's the first time I knew that NPS could be negative. I thought 0 was the worst that you could go to. And anyway, so I was flummoxed, basically. And then I chanced upon this book, Rohin. I chanced upon this book called Uncommon Service. It's a HBS authored book by this lady professor called Frances Frey. She's right now on the...
We went back to some of our older episodes to make a supercut of some very specific answers from our guests to questions on motivation, perseverance, finding the right opportunity in a difficult market, and fighting stress. Good stress, as one of our guests calls it. I highly recommend going back and listening to our full episodes. You'll find the links in the show notes, but this is a great place to start too. Let's start with Deep Kalra, the founder and chairman of MakeMyTrip, a company that began when India wasn't even ready for internet businesses. Deep talks about surviving as a travel business through the pandemic, learning to stay in the game, and building to last. You were one of the first tech companies from India to list. You listed on NASDAQ. When was that?
Yeah, we listed in 2010. It was August 2010, and we were definitely the first. Actually, interestingly, we were the second internet company from India to list. Sadly, the first listing didn't work out very well. That was Rediff. Rediff.com, which was, I think, ahead of their time. Ajit Balakrishna is a real visionary, and I have a lot of respect for the gentleman. Learned a lot from him. But I think at that point of time, the market just wasn't ready to support a model which was non-transaction, to your point. So that had already become, I think they got delisted, became a penny stock. So when we listed, we were the first travel company from India to list on NASDAQ or in the US. And we were, I guess, one of the first few tech companies, internet companies to list there.
Would you remember how much of venture capital you had raised before you listed?
Oh yeah, it's not hard to this thing. We'd done 4 rounds and I probably remember the total of each. So the first round, we got 5 into the company. 4 was to buy out angels. Second round was probably about 15, 20. So I'm gonna say about 70 million or so.
All right.
Yeah, 70 million.
If you were to start a new MakeMyTrip, if MakeMyTrip didn't exist and you were starting it today, would $70 million be enough to build a business?
I think it could have been because that happened over 10-year life cycle. And first 5 years, as you know, we just struggled. So really, those 4 rounds were between 2005 to 2010. I think we do it very differently. I'd do it very differently today.
How
I would
so?
definitely have one less zero in the number of people. I would love to say two less zeros, but that's very hard to do. I mean, I would love to be more pure play, which is very hard in a transaction business, but still, I think given where AI is today and just, of course, the internet's on fire right now with ChatGPT, and I've been fooling around and playing with it and just having the time of my life. I think you can do much more today with tech and with AI, which is really going forward. I
With
think
fewer people.
it's much fewer people and more reliably and better. So I think we'd structure the business differently. But given competition, given the cost of advertising, etc., today, I think that would probably take the number back up again. So maybe we'd end up in 100 million or so. But less than 100 million today is pretty hard to build a brand in India. It's become a very competitive space.
Do you want to tell us why you listed in NASDAQ at the
Sure.
NASDAQ in 2010, and whether today, given that listing in India is a viable option, how that route has changed for other startups as well?
Sure. And it was viable even then to list in India. And Rohin, that was the one decision where I think our board was split down the middle. Till then, we had a pretty harmonious board. And I can say I thought we did a good job of managing a good board, etc. But when it came to listing, firstly, it sounds a little strange and crazy, but I didn't think we could list at that point of time. It was Sanjeev Bikhchandani who was on our board as an independent. Sanjeev told us, listen, your numbers. He was at a board meeting it was the last quarter of 2009. Yeah. So in January, we were reviewing the last quarter of 2009. We had a board meeting in Jan, and he says, I think you guys are ready to list. I said, are you serious? He says, yeah, we listed in 2007 and we were smaller than you guys. And you guys are growing so fast and you're doing this thing. You should think about listing. And I remember Rajesh and I looking at each other and saying, seriously, like we want to eventually. We didn't know. He says, you should. So the next question was where? And so there were many pros and cons for both markets. And the US and I had, 3 US-based investors on the board. And all 3 of them were obviously pretty keen on the US market because they understood that well. The independents were pretty keen on India. I mean, just being Indian, having grown up in India and, done all my education in India, I was very excited about India and we would get the big advantage of brand in India. But the markets just weren't ready. So it was a pretty heated debate. I seek time out for a week and I said, okay, folks, I'm going to give me a week. I'll come back. And for that week, I literally spoke to as many people as I could who had experience in listing in both markets and, wise men. So I remember reaching out to Nandan, who I knew a bit. Nandan put me on to Mohandas Pai, was very helpful, generous with his time, gave me, half an hour of his time on the phone and told me about their experience. Infosys, which had always been kind of a North Star for us, the way they had built that company, the culture, the, very, very wide spread out stock. So I was always inspired by it. He spoke about it. One of my classmates and good friends from IIM Ahmedabad had been on the board of Bharti and few other companies from Warburg Pincus. This is Pulak Prasad. I spoke to Pulak and Pulak gave me his point of view. I spoke to, interestingly, OnMobi, not Naveen's company, not InMobi, OnMobile.
Rajesh.
Yeah. I spoke to him, and at that point
Rajesh
in time,
Reddy.
I think there was a Rao gentleman.
No, sorry, my bad. That's different. That's right. Arvind Rao.
Arvind. So I spoke to him and a bunch of people who had listed in both markets, and they had, one or the other and a good point of view. Ajit Balakrishna and few others. And net, I came to the conclusion that I didn't listen to the bankers then because the bankers were very clear. Like the foreign bankers wanted to list in the US, the Indian bankers wanted to list here. There was a bias. So I came to the conclusion that India wasn't ready for internet businesses, despite Naukri having listed and done well, which was InfoEdge. And the fundamental difference was InfoEdge was collected their money from enterprises. We were their clients and we would cut them a check and they had salespeople. But everything online was free, right? Making a CV, etc. Yes, they tried to charge a little bit more. So it was a very different business from ours. Ours was a classic B2C business. So I came to the conclusion that US has got, I think I'd already counted at that point close to 100 online businesses, of which a third were international. So a lot of Chinese companies had listed there, some Latin American companies. They'd all listed on the NASDAQ, by and large over NYSE. And, that's what we went with that. And at that point of time, I think it was the right decision. And absolutely today, India is just so exciting. So, yeah, I think given the right point of time, we definitely would. It's already out in the open. So we would look at it. There's no question.
You've seen travel end multiple
Yeah,
times.
yeah, really. And also the SARS epidemic. And so, but for those next 4 years, I think the only thing one kept going, there was no money. The 2 years,
What kept
really
you
no
going?
compensation. I think I was just very, very fixated for 2 reasons. So one reason was, I think the logical reason, which is we were getting better at what we were doing literally week on week. So I always kept metrics very close to heart. It was the most important ratios were improving. So conversion was improving, which is the most important ratio. And repeat in our business then, we were selling US India tickets. Repeat was very hard to measure because people came once a year.
Frequency is so low.
Yeah, exactly. So, but conversion was definitely improving. Coca was improving, cost of customer acquisition. So unit economics were getting slightly better. So we just needed the lines to intersect, revenue and cost, right? But we needed fuel for that. So there was a logical thing that, listen, we're getting better at whatever we're doing. People like our service. They do refer us. We had a referral program, everything. And the second, I think, was not such a logical reason, but was probably stubbornness or whatever it's called. But I think to prove to myself that, I can do this, because I was mortally afraid that if I fail now, I won't have the guts to do another venture. Because AMF bowling, which was not my venture, had also been a failure. So I couldn't afford another one. 2 dots make a line. And I think for me, it was a little bit more. And that today is, I think, my single biggest advice. It sounds like a, monotone. I keep saying the same thing, like a repeat to people, to youngsters, is that just hang in there. Don't give up too early. Because so many businesses haven't seen the light of day because someone gave up too early. And it's not only my story. I remember, we were in discussion together with 2 of my early stage guys, both in the downturn, who became co-founders. And we had an offer from a very large company, we can talk about it now, Ascendant, which was really big in travel. They owned the GDS, which is called Travelport now and all. This is way back in 2003 or 4. I had not drawn a salary for 18 months. There was stress at home, no matter, like it was all our savings, wife's savings, everything gone. And these guys had taken big cuts, 50 and 70% cuts they were on. And we had an offer, and I was going in for this meeting. It was a luncheon meeting. Our office was in Nachini, and we decided internally, if we get an offer of 10 million, we'll sell. We'll agree. These guys started with 5. It was nothing. Went on. And finally, we inched it up to, I think they went up to about 7, 7.5, something like, they said 7 and they mumbled a little bit more. And the meeting ended. And I was actually very relieved. But
that you did not have to make that
had
call.
They said 10, I had said, yeah, because we had got very desperate. So I think somewhere along the way, we also got lucky along the way that these things didn't happen. But if we didn't, we would have sold out. And I heard the same story from Sachin Bansal at a conference once, where Sachin said that we agreed to sell the company for, I think, 5 or 10 million. Verbally sold it. We were going through terrible times, only books that time. Came back, and they had an advisor he didn't name, who he says, "Khoob unhone gali di," and bola, "You're building a good thing. Hang on, keep at it." They went on to build India's most valuable, I guess, internet business, if you think about it. So I think basically, it comes from the gut, and there needs to be some stubbornness. But if you are doing it, you're doing something right, just that giving up too early, that's the easiest thing you can do. And they say first sign of winter, you just say, I call it quits and all, because opportunity cost, you say, is so high. That's where your linkage of the money question comes in.
That's my point.
The money,
yeah.
What is the opportunity cost? If you look at your lifespan of earnings, most of us will work for 30, 40 years or whatever it is. And we all know at the peak, you'll more than make up. And especially if you're building your own business, the wealth will solve for itself. But are you doing it for the money, or are you doing it for the satisfaction? And anyone in the world who's been there, done that, will tell you the satisfaction is far more important, because you almost don't know what to do with more money beyond a certain point. Again, it's easy to say in the early stage of life, you need the money. I was ready to sell the business. That time, I owned 55% of the business, something like that. I said, that's a lot of money, man. Sell the business, get out, or management held 55, or most of that was probably mine. And it would have been, I would have, I think, kicked myself every second day when someone else came up and when travel became such a big category, online travel, and when someone else IPO'd and someone else said, oh my God, we were there, we had a better service. So living with regret is very hard. And the only way not to have that is eke it out, eke it out, eke it out till you have nothing left. And as they say, and then some. So run on fumes, do it. What will happen? So long as you're surviving, you're providing for, your family, then you can at least say, listen, I tried it. It didn't work. And sometimes don't be stubborn about how you do it. I think you have to tweak models, but definitely be resolute. Maybe that's a better word than stubborn about, like, we are building something special. I think the rest solves for itself. And, I'm very sure you're going to do that at Ken too. And I know you're not chasing money right now. I mean, I see what you guys are building. It's just quality. And quality means, followership, readership, word of mouth, and all the good things happen. But if you don't have quality at the end of the day, there's no point.
Why do it?
You were better off doing what you were doing. So I think it's the opportunity cost is, was I happier? And for me, I was miserable being a banker. I made great friends. I'm still very close to the crew there, the ABN AMRO crew, set up IndusInd Bank. My first bosses were Ramesh Sopti, Sohel Chandar, people I just absolutely adore and love. And they taught me a lot. But I was not cut out to be a banker, and I was unhappy. And the simple test of being unhappy is you start looking at the clock. And I tell people, even here, all our new joinees, if you're looking at the clock, whether it's a meeting or it's time to go home in the evening, means you're not enjoying what you're doing.
Probably means
you're not enjoying what you're doing.
Might as well.
It's like go back to college. Yeah, there were classes you don't know where that 1 hour went, and there were classes where the damn clock wouldn't move. We all know that, right? I've counted seconds in some classes. It's so sad. Like you just want it to end. But the meetings where you're having fun, like I'm having a blast here. I could talk for 3 hours. You'll miss your flight. But it's just you're having fun. So I think that is the most important thing for a very simple reason, not because you're not bored or something, because you'll give your best when you're having fun. So one of our core values at work is fun at work. One of our core values. If you're not having fun, please, you're in the wrong.
Can I just go deeper into something?
Sure.
By the way, please, you should.
No, we should continue. I'm fine.
One of the things that you said is that I was miserable. If you're miserable at work, it's a signal, right? At some level, right? Like I'm saying that you also said that when you were going through your toughest times, 18 months not taking a salary, you were also incredibly frustrated at what you were doing. So if I were to compare, like, to a lot of people, it would assume from the outside that you were unhappy in both situations. While you were working for a large bank, you were unhappy. While you were working for your own startup, also I'm not using the word unhappy here because I know it's not unhappy.
Yeah, exactly.
But how does someone from the outside sense that even though you were incredibly frustrated and probably at times broke and just looking to sell out, you were not unhappy there?
Yeah.
And in the other context, you were actually getting a good salary, but you were unhappy.
No, it's a great point. Firstly, who cares if someone from what they think from the outside, right? It's your thing. Because you've got to take that call. The only other person who matters is your family, your partner, your spouse. And you've got to come home happy. Now, if you're enjoying and you're working hard and you're very satisfied at what you're building, you're clearly not unhappy. Frustrated is also a strong word. I think you sometimes get desperate, right? Because, there's no money. That's fundamental.
Stress. There is
stress.
But it's
like good stress.
That's right.
Yeah, it's good stress. Also, you're saying, listen, but you're buzzing. You almost can't sleep with excitement, right? You can't wait to go back. I don't know if you do it. Even now, sometimes when you can't sleep and you get ideas, earlier it used to be pen and paper. Now you just put it on the phone as a note because you probably forget it, but you do get ideas. I always take some.
I have colleagues who get these calls from me late in the evening and they're like, so I have a brainwave.
Yeah. I take time to normally, get to bed because the mind's still active. But it's great because you have those thoughts, you put them in place and all. So I think there's a big difference. So you can be stressed out. I think that's the right word. You can be stressed. We're stressed even today. Through COVID, we were damn stressed. But there was no question of what we were to do. It was, there was, I think, a mission critical out there.
Next, we have Ruchi Kalra, who has built 2 profitable unicorns in 7 years. of Business and OxyZo. She takes us through an important maxim that drives both her businesses: finding the right opportunity in the right sector, even if it's crowded. Ruchi, you're the second person on this show who's running a business which is essentially two unicorns within it. And I think that's like a very interesting thing for India to have that many entrepreneurs who are running multiple unicorns that have been spun out from the same business. But I thought it was a very interesting connection for us. The other person was Naveen Tiwari, who started InMobi and then started Glance. Do you want to tell us which are the two unicorns you're related to?
Okay. So very, very glad to be right here talking about both Off Business and OxyZo. Both unicorns and in their own standing individual standalone companies. And I think kudos to the entire team for Off Business as well as OxyZo. And even the leadership for both the different organizations. Yes, both of them actually came together from the fundamental idea that we wanted to cater to all B2B needs of the SME ecosystem. And as we saw that space, we realized that raw material on a standalone basis, which is essentially Off Business, the largest B2B marketplace, is one opportunity. But along with that, credit was a standalone opportunity. And as we saw the space, we saw an opportunity.
Wait, I'm going to stop you here because you're going way too deep
Oh,
for
is
us
it?
to kind of begin with.
Okay.
We will definitely go deeper into this as the podcast progresses.
Yeah.
But for now, let's just let me start by asking you, who's Ruchi Kalra? Like, because I really had to struggle to figure out what is the title, what do I introduce you as? So let me put that to you. Who's Ruchi Kalra? What is her title?
So I think I'm an OFBN, as we classify each person at Off Business and OxyZo as. But in terms of title, in terms of introduction, actually, most of my time goes into OxyZo. So I'm the CEO for OxyZo Financial Services and very actively involved in Off Business or OFB Tech, as they put it, from a finance perspective. So yes, a co-founder at Off Business and the CEO of OxyZo Financial Services.
Are you also the CFO of
I used
Business?
to in my prior role. I still
You
play
no
that.
longer.
I still
Right.
play that role. Yes, but most of my time goes into OxyZo Financial Services.
Wonderful. So that's so the connections between Off Business and OxyZo are interesting. And of course, the fact that the multiple co-founders who came together to start up.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Like, tell us about how did Off Business, which was the first of the businesses,
Yes.
how did it come about?
So this was late 2015. My prior experience was with McKinsey and Company as a partner there in the financial services practice. Along with me, other co-founders as Ashish. He was with Matrix Partners, and prior to that in McKinsey, and prior to that with ITC. I happened to meet him at McKinsey, and my better half as well. And Bhuvan, who actually leads technology as a CTO across both OFP and OxyZo, and Vasant and Nitin. So all of us kind of got together at that point in time in late 2015, 2016, early 2016. We saw that there was a lot of opportunity. In fact, that time you saw a lot of B2C startups. And because most of us came with like 10, 15 years of experience, we had seen the SME ecosystem. We'd seen like real businesses in manufacturing, infrastructure, and so on and so forth, right? And we saw that there was a huge opportunity to actually build a raw material marketplace in this space itself. And
I'm going to stop you there and ask you, what is the when you say, I mean, to a lay listener who's listening, it's like you're saying we saw the huge material in the raw material space.
Yeah.
Now take us back to while you were at McKinsey, Ashish was at Matrix, etc. What were you seeing as this? What is this huge raw material opportunity? How did it exist? How were you coming across it in your day-to-day work, etc.? How does a normal person spot it? What was this?
Okay, so let me first describe what B2B is, right? So if you were to start with saying, okay, you see a phone, you see a bottle, you see tables around you, right? So there is someone who's manufacturing things. You look out of the window, you see a road, you see a bridge, right? And there are enterprises who are building this, who are building India in terms of infrastructure, in terms of manufacturing, and that's the B2B opportunity, right? Whatever you see around. And for us, we realized that the opportunity essentially would be saying, okay, there is steel which goes into building something. There is chemical which goes into actually all daily use items. Or there could be, for that matter, polymers that you're using in a bottle, or for that matter, in your furniture around, right? And when you see these raw materials, what happens in these raw materials? These are produced by very large manufacturers, right? Like a GSW, Tata, SAIL. For steel, for that matter, there is chemical and polymer, Reliance and all. Then it gets sold to a very large distributor. Then it goes sold to a next distributor. And then it comes to the guy who's actually manufacturing end goods out of it. Like, for example, car parts, auto parts, right? Or for that matter, like bottles and so on and so forth, right? So there are various layers in between. And when we say B2B, it is essentially the trade which is happening between these different nodes. And when an off business sees this opportunity, it's essentially saying that, can I get goods or these raw materials directly from a large manufacturer of raw material to these SMEs who are then using these raw materials to produce an end good and selling it to, say, a Maruti, or selling it to...
How do you do that? Where do you come in? Like prior to off business, or like, your sort of business models? I'm assuming that this trade already existed, right?
Yes.
So where do you come in and what do you do?
Actually, this trade that we're talking about is huge in terms of volume. Like, for example, steel itself could be a $100 billion industry. Chemicals itself is a $300 billion industry, right? In India alone, right? And when we say India essentially is the land of intermediaries, right? And these intermediaries in between the large manufacturer of a raw material to actually a consumption guy on the raw material, the manufacturer who's actually using these raw materials, there would be 3 or 4 different intermediaries in between. One is co-located with the manufacturer of raw material. One is co-located with the SME of the raw material, and someone in between. These intermediaries either stock, these intermediaries either finance, these intermediaries either ensure goods are transported, right? So at each node, there is some margin that an intermediary keeps. But if you build a platform, which we intended to, and we actually saw that we could actually get the goods directly from a very large manufacturer to these individual SMEs, and hence leading to benefit for the SME as well, and a new channel of distribution for the manufacturer as well. And that's where Off Business was born. We started our journey more as steel as a raw material. Currently, we exist in 9 different value chains, which includes industrial steel and construction steel, which includes chemicals, which includes polymers, which includes agri products, which includes materials like bitumen, so on and so forth, right? So
if I were to try and draw an analogy, not an exact analogy, but in the B2C space or in the consumer goods space, it's the equivalent of saying a local Kirana store shop cannot just go to a Unilever or P&G and say, I want to buy from you, because at that scale and volume, they cannot. Therefore, there is a distributor layer, wholesaler layer, etc. and all that. And something similar exists in the B2B space as well. And so you're essentially trying to reduce the number of intermediaries and make it a faster and more efficient. That's what Off Business came up with.
Yes, that's right. The interesting part about the B2B space is that similar chains can exist for end products and similar chains can exist for raw materials. There are a few players who are there on the end product side, B2B, like for example, what you described, right? Let me break the chain for end products traversing from a Unilever to a retailer. Similarly, we'll say, okay, let's go back and say this, to even manufacture that end product, you needed a raw material. That's the chain we break. Right from starting from a steel, which goes into an infra guy to actually build the bridge. Or for that matter, if I take an agri example to it, then it's like, for example, you'll need almonds to make even the biscuit, which is actually going to get sold to a retailer, right? So an almond trade will need to happen, wherein you either will import or take it and then sell it to a very large guy like an ITC.
I got that. Now, this chain in many essences can extend all the way, at one end to the consumer and all the way at the other end to wherever is the rawest form of material, right? So as Off Business, where is it that you folks say that, we will play in, or where, is there any part of this chain where you say this is not for us and this is where we will play?
Yeah. So for us, something that's very clear in our mind is, in the true B2B way, we do not want to own a brand or something, right? So we are doing it for someone, right? So our starting or genesis is with the fact that we will supply those raw materials which are, for example, there are a lot of intermediaries in between so that there is real value to the platform and discovery. The second part is saying that, okay, if you need it, if you don't take it, someone else can take it. That's what raw material is. Finished goods is something that is manufactured to design and so on. So for us at of business to start with, it has to be saying that you have to be in the raw material side such that the consumer for us or the SME for us is himself a manufacturer who's taking that raw material and producing something to sell it to a larger anchor or an interest. So the core sectors of the economy is where we want to be associated with. And these core sectors of the economy to produce the goods that they manufacture would need some of these raw materials that we exist. So that's the chain we will stay in.
What motivates and drives you on a daily basis? Like deep down inside, what makes you get up and constantly strive?
So I'll actually compare it to my earlier days at McKinsey, I think, or maybe earlier days even in school, college, etc. So there was this urge to do well, to prove yourself, right? Especially when you're growing from the background, you just feel to say that, okay, you just need to, as if you're there to prove that you're good, right? I think as an entrepreneur, one big change that at least I see in myself is the fact that suddenly that urge to prove yourself is not there, right? Suddenly that urge is more to say, okay, how well is the business doing, right? Suddenly you wake up in the morning and saying, okay, there are these things I have to do, right? And at the same time, it's suddenly flipped to saying, how well are people around you doing? Around you in the sense your team doing, right? And I think that completely shifts the gear. It says, okay, people.
It's no longer about you.
Yeah, it's suddenly that the pressure of trying to say to the world that you are, you want to work hard so that you get good marks, or you want to work hard to get a good job, or you're at a good job but you want to get a good rating. That suddenly changes from saying that, okay, what's the book size of OxyZo? Okay, what else do I need to do? Okay, what do we need to do in this particular initiative? Or, for example, or people who have grown up with you in your teams, and you sit back and say, wow, I mean, this person has transformed in 4-5 years, or this person has completely. And I think that gives you that satisfaction to come back again and say, how many more heroes can you create?
So this is very fascinating because I'm kind of zooming out and seeing what you're saying here. What you're saying is that up till a particular time in school, with your first job at McKinsey, etc., you were trying to prove yourself. And at some point now, you have receded to the background. And I think the sense of achievement has allowed you to put the focus on your team members, your organization. I'm going to build others.
That's it. So, and you wake up in the morning and you just feel that, okay, if you close your eyes to think about the top 20-25 people who, in fact, our business has been a space wherein a lot of people has joined as freshers. Okay, and that's been the core DNA, right? They've right after college or 1 year, 2 year experience, etc. And you close your eyes and you find so many faces, and you say, okay, they grew up here, right? And you just feel that, okay, there can be many more such people who will grow up here, and or people who've already grown up, they themselves are entrepreneur in their own right. I mean, whenever I'm in a conversation and someone says, okay, you're this co-founder for of business OxyZo 2, and I'm like, it's not me. It's those people who are standing along, and I can't express it in those many words, but I mean, you can feel that energy. And I think that's what gets me going and motivated to come to office every day.
Are you a person who's motivated by goals or the journey?
Goals are important, because if you don't set goals, you cannot drive people to that journey. But whenever we set goals, I always tell my people, enjoy the journey, right? So the goal, you can achieve that goal and still not be happy, because maybe you know put someone under the bus, etc. So don't do that. I'm okay with if 80% or 90% of that goal is achieved, but do enjoy that journey.
When you're at your lowest, what motivates you?
When I'm at the lowest, I think It's people. Because you see there are people who would have so many personal problems, but still they'll come to office and they'll give their best in office, right? And you're like, okay, I mean, things will come and go, right? This too shall pass, right? That's the statement that comes to my mind. And I said, okay, fine. I mean, we have to achieve something, and let's just aim towards, as you said, the goal. And
What do
there
you-
have been low times, by the way, in the sense professionally also. I think the second round that we were out there to raise, it was like massive set of rejections, right? And then one fine day, like a lot of
What
the
were the reasons?
investors, that time B2B people didn't understand that much. And that
This was what, 2019?
yeah, this was
20 or
Series B, right? And there were a lot of these questions: credit, do you want to build a balance sheet? People at that time were more asset light and all those things, and we had this notion of building an NBFC separate and all those things, right? A lot of those questions, and B2C was the flavor, and rightfully so, right? Each investor has the right to have those pieces, and once I went to our office, it was another office, and you stood in that open area where you can see everybody sitting, and you're like, okay, you don't have a choice. Don't even think about when all you need is one investor, right? And that's what keeps you going, right? That's what keeps you going when you look at people who
Who was
put in
that
so
one
much faith.
investor?
At that
At
time,
that point.
Zodius came through, and then Creation came in next, right? So the fact is that you have to, when you look at people who believe in you, then that lifts you up suddenly.
Kamal Sagar, the founder of Total Environment, has had just one thing driving him for 27 years: good quality. Good quality that he says not even thousands of real estate companies in the West are not able to deliver on. The most interesting part is how he does it. Kamal builds homes the way software is built. Listen on. Kamal, I want to take you back to 1990, IIT Kharagpur, where you were a student, of course, and your thesis for which you got a C. Do you want to tell us why you got a C?
Uh, well, so I was very clear in college that I wanted to, whatever I was doing was, I wanted to do what I thought made sense and not necessarily do it just for the grades. So the thesis was on SOS Children's Village in Bhubaneswar. And so I had certain, concept in mind from understanding, the problem, and decided that's how I'm going to do it. Unfortunately, my professors had a very different idea. They wanted me to do it in a certain, in a very different way from that. So, but when I didn't listen to their recommendation and just did what I wanted to, and I knew that I will therefore get a C. So I did that, and I ended up with a C. Also, I wrote, during those college years, I had always been very rebellious. So I also wrote on the introduction to the thesis that this thesis is dedicated to Renu and Shahrukh Mistry, which is where I did my training here in Bangalore. I said it's dedicated to Renu and Shahrukh Mistry for restoring much of the confidence taken away from me by this department. So I submitted it with that.
So, in many ways, you were asking for it.
I was asking for it, absolutely.
There was also this, we first spoke about this when we first met back in 2011. And one of the things that you spoke about was also your belief about integrating plants, greenery into architecture, where, as I understand, one of the feedback that you got was this makes no sense. It's going to lead to seepage. It's going to lead to a lot of issues. So remove all the plants and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that was actually, maybe when you said 1990, you meant that. Thesis was 92. So 1990 was a design studio. And the design problem given to us was a school, a typical elementary school. And I had designed it in a manner that the roof of the floor of the school was sunk 3 feet below ground level, so that the roof was at about 5 feet, at kind of eye level of the kids. And so therefore it was sunk, and then the roof was completely green. It was landscaped. It had plants growing and all of that. And my prof was, again, he was very upset. He said, you're going to have all these seepage issues, and if you're sinking the building down, the walls are going to be damp. How can you do something like this? I want you to put the building back up, remove all the plants and everything. And again, I didn't do that. I submitted the plans as it was. And on that day, he got very, very furious. He literally tore those sheets apart and threw them on the floor and stomped out of the classroom. He was very upset. But yeah.
That belief, in many ways, the idea of bringing nature into architecture and into homes, etc., is in many ways one of the signature themes of total environment today. Is that not?
It is. So I think from the very beginning, what was very clear is that if you're designing and creating a home for a family, one of the first things that any human actually looks for is that connection with nature. So even if you're on the 14th floor of an apartment, you want to connect with nature. So the question was, why not? Why can't you do it? Why can't you just cantilever a little garden space from the living room and fill it with soil and plants and do that? And that's what we did way back in 96, 97. And every single home that we have done since then has that garden, which has become signature. But we didn't do it with the idea of creating like a USP or something. It was just commonsensical to just do that. It was like, this makes sense, just do it. So yeah.
It's interesting that you should say that, because I went back to my notes, and your first residential project was in 1996 in Bangalore, Cirrus
Yes.
Minor.
Yes.
And from the notes, it turns out that you actually made a loss.
Yeah.
I think you earned about 1.12 crores on the entire project, while you spent 1.32 crores.
137 actually, yeah.
137. that's right.
25 lakh loss, which we knew at the beginning that it's going to cost us that much. And also we had made some mistakes, like we had not charged separately. We didn't know. We were just a bunch of kids. So we didn't know that you actually charge separately for car parks and things like that. So we had not charged all of that. And anyway, so we were locked in with that number. And it was important at that point in time to establish the product and the ideas that we had, and didn't want to wait for 5 or 10 years to slowly get there. So we wanted to build what we wanted to build, and it was going to cost 137. So there were only two options. One is build something mediocre which didn't make any sense. It was better to then do something else rather than do that, or to go back to customers and ask for more, which we didn't want to do. So we just decided to build it. So the only way we could do that was to go out there and search for more projects which would help to finance this one. So
And on your second project, you made a profit of 8 lakhs.
we set out with a profit of 8 lakhs, but that's where we introduced the gardens. The very first project, Cirrus Minor, didn't have gardens, and that idea of bringing in the gardens came with the second one, and we introduced them later after having already sold them. So the 8 lakh profit there also became a 16 lakh loss, because we ended up spending 24 lakhs more on the garden. So but there was that very strong, when I look back, very strong inner conviction, that we'll get past all this. So there was never a doubt in the mind that we are asking for trouble, that we are going to get stuck possibly, or how we ever go to that thought never crossed the mind. It was very clear that so what, okay, this is fine, there is going to be another project, we'll make up for this, there's going to be a fourth project.
What motivates or drives you?
So sometimes I don't know. I think it's that very strong inner, and it's beyond what you can consciously control. So it's this inner drive or inner desire to make a difference, and possibly because you also feel very strongly that you can make a difference. So you know that if I do this, I'm going to make some impact or some positive contribution to people's lives, and then you want to do it. So
Could you help us, I think, pin it down? Like, for instance, in your first few projects back in 1996, 1997, what did that mean, make a difference? And what does make a difference mean today?
So maybe I can tell you a little bit with a few examples.
Sure.
So of how it actually has made a difference, right? So we also have this project of ours all the way in Texas, on the other side of the planet. And a few months back, we have an experience home there that we built, which is similar to the kind of stuff we do here in the same philosophy, the same exposed brick and everything designed around the courtyard to bring the outdoors in and all of those things. And there's this girl who visited this experience home just to check it out, and she walked inside, and after a few minutes she started crying. And our sales head, Candice, walked up to her and asked her, ma'am, is everything okay? Can I help you? And she said, no, I'm fine. I grew up in a total environment home in Bangalore, and this brought back memories. So those are the things that make you realize that you are making some difference to someone's life somewhere. And there are many other such, stories of things that have happened. And that's, but back then, that's you're asking me about when we started out, right? How did we?
Yeah, because the sense that I'm getting is that making a difference doesn't seem to be an attainable goal, in the sense that 26, 27 years later, you're still talking about making a difference. So clearly, it's a moving goalpost.
Of course.
And
absolutely.
its definition changes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand, what was your definition 26 years, 25 years ago, and what is it today, and what might it be 10 years from now?
So, sure. So the definition hasn't changed, but I think it is an unattainable goal. So the aspiration at that time, and continues to be even till today, was a few things. One was just quality that is reliable. So a home where things don't fall apart, you don't have leaks, you don't have waterproofing issues, you don't have short circuit, just simple things. And and it's surprising, but the world over, housing is a commoditized thing, right? And anywhere, even in the Western world, quality is bad. Just simple, basic things don't work.
Why is that? Because
It
this
is-
has existed
Yeah.
for
Centuries.
absolutely
Yeah.
thousands of years,
Correct.
and there's incredible amounts of money involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's all the talent in the world, and yet, why is it so?
So, and if you look at the automobile industry, which is 100 years, 120 years old, there's a massive difference in the reliability between the two things. I think the reasons are many. One is, it is such a basic need. Everybody needs a home. So there's, for the companies that are making the homes, there's so much of low-hanging fruit. You just make it and just deliver. Nobody is asking you to make it better. So you're able to kind of get away with it. That's why. So nobody even wants to do it. The other thing, I guess, is that it's this whole project versus product approach, right? So the whole industry has worked on a project approach. Every project is started from scratch. You figure out everything at that project level. And when you're done with the project, you close it and you go and start all over again with very little learning transfer to the next one. Whereas in production, it is there's a product, right? In manufacturing. So you have an iPhone 3, which becomes a 4, which becomes a 7 and a 13.
And
right?
the learning
It keeps-
from
each one keeps improving. And because you're producing thousands of these, every small little detail gets that much more attention, because you're going to produce it in massive volume. So whereas that doesn't happen in this industry, in the construction industry, you're just doing 100 homes or 150 homes.
But why? There are large enough real estate companies that do thousands and tens of thousands of this thing all over the world as well, right? So why
Very few,
isn't
actually.
there isn't?
No, honestly, there are no real estate companies that are doing it all over the world. There are people. So real estate has been very localized. There are large organizations that have gone out and tried to do
Sorry,
it.
I
and-
meant that there are companies all over the world that build homes in the thousands each year.
Right. Yes.
It may be in their own respective country. Like, for
Correct.
instance, perhaps to use an example, maybe Shobha developers
Yeah.
in
Right.
Bangalore, etc.,
Yes, yeah.
and lots more in the West.
Correct.
So my question is, again, not to be any specific about any company, why isn't there more of productization, like you said?
It's just, I don't know. Because we started taking this product approach in 2008, and it's working really well for us. So I honestly don't know why it's not been done in the past. So I guess
Can I sorry, I'm sorry to be interrupting,
Not at all.
but when you say that you started adopting a product approach in 2008, what does that mean in the context of homes?
So we had this project in Kanakpura Road called the Magic Faraway Tree, and there we had these 3,500 square feet duplex apartments, 72 of them in one building. And when I was doing the next project and I wanted to design a similar size 3-bedroom apartment, it just struck me, I wasn't able to come up with a design that was better than this one. So I kept going back to this because whatever I was coming up with was not. And then it was like, why am I trying to do it again when we already have something that's there and so good? And we should only try to do something different if it's better than this. Otherwise, you stick to this and keep improving this. So that was the genesis of that thought process. But in parallel, what was also going on in the mind is that if we can do it like a product, we'll be able to keep on improving it. So we'll be able to give that much more attention to every little part because we're going to repeat it. So we did. So we took the very consciously at that time decided to do. We called this the D35 product, and we decided to put the same thing in Pune in a project called Songs from the Wood, in Bangalore in Whitefield, in phase 2 of Magic Faraway Tree. We just repeated that same product. We made a few improvements. So we had D35
what would
version
this
2.
product be when you say D35?
Yeah.
What does it like? What does it mean when you say it's a product? Is it a design? Is it a?
It's the unit, the home unit. So it's the 3,500 square feet duplex apartment. So if you exclude the lobbies and the everything else in the building and just look at the home unit as a block, that is the product.
So does that not change project to project because the shapes of the buildings alter, etc.? So are you saying that D35?
You can take the D35 as a unit and adapt. You can combine it with other product units into a tower in different ways, and you can repeat it. Yeah.
All right. So the facade changes from the outside, and then some amount of customization. So you're saying essentially that 80% of it doesn't change.
Actually, the product doesn't change at all.
At all.
And the product doesn't work if you change even 1% of it.
Oh,
it has to be 100% the same, or at least in terms of, so we do versions, right? So we have D35 version 2. So it is different from the version 1. But within version 2, whenever you're doing version 2 anywhere, it has to be 100% the same. Because that's the only way you can take advantage of the product approach, where you're repeating everything.
A version would include ceiling heights, room sizes,
minor things. So like in the D35 version 2, for example, we made the shower cubicle a little larger. We moved the kitchen a little bit so that it would face in a slightly different way and get better light. We changed the entrance. So there's small
in
things.
many ways, you're building homes the way software is typically built, which is essentially you're constantly
upgrading. In fact, because of e-design, and I think we spoke about that when you interviewed me for the Ken, was that we are actually able to, through e-design, incorporate those changes even along the way.
That's the software you have as well. We'll come to that.
Yeah.
But I think I would be remiss if I did not tell our listeners what total environment means to many of us who've been in Bangalore for a while, because people would have heard 3,500 square foot duplex apartments. But total environment, for those of us who've been in Bangalore for a while, is this quintessentially Bangalore kind of apartments, which are what many of us aspire to, because there are these giant apartments, brick facades, trees coming out of balconies, and exquisitely landscaped, etc. And of course they're large, for those of you who are in Bombay and other cities, it might sound like, did we miss a decimal place here? But perhaps no, that's really what it is. Come on, let's talk about software. You said that in many ways, how you build apartments is how people build software. And you also have software of your own, proprietary software of your own. Tell us about that.
So, from the beginning, the other thing that we felt is very important when you're creating a home for someone is to be able to design it to work for them in every way, not just aesthetics and lifestyle, but also functionality and everything else. So right from the beginning, we would actually sit with every family and understand their needs and then design each home around their needs. And of course, you can only do a certain number of homes when you're doing it manually. You're constrained by
manually means on a drafting
sitting
table
down with the family, listening to them, understanding, going back to the drawing board, drawing, making sketches and concepts, and coming back with ideas to them. So over a period of time, as we scaled up and when we signed up Windmills of Your Mind, for example, at that time, 400 units, and everyone advised us that you'll have to now stop doing this, right? How can you do it for 400? And we were like, this is something that is so important and it's working so well. Why? There's no way we're going to stop this, right? So
this implying customization of
custom interior design.
you allow your customers to
completely redesign the interiors so that it works for them. Everybody's very different, right? There's a family with elderly parents. There's another family with 3 kids or a newborn child. Somebody's got 5, or 3 dogs. Somebody's got a sitar at home. Everyone's very different. They've all got all kinds of different requirements. So we always felt that you have to be able to design around each family, and that's what we did from the beginning. So around the year 2008, when we were just about to start windmills, we realized that now we have to kind of find a way to automate this process, or to create a software that will allow customers to design it themselves, and but design it themselves, not just choose options, and not things where they could make a mistake. So we were very clear, you can't allow them to make a mistake. So it has to work, all the different. So it was it wasn't very easy. So in the beginning we did a makeshift version by 2010, which is very, I would say 20% automated and 80% still manual. So we automated a few parts of the process, and we kind of still managed with that. But around 2014 to 18 is when we decided that we really need to now make this completely automated. And we were fortunate to find this really good company called ThoughtWorks, because we needed a partner who would be willing to work with us and get into the depths of what it takes to do this, and not just treat it as another software project, but really get into brainstorming, thinking, finding solutions. Because when you're moving walls in a home, and with the walls, the switch points are moving, and the beds are moving, and everything is moving, how do you actually control all this, right? So it wasn't a straightforward, linear thought process that these are the steps, you automate it like this and it's done. It is something where you have to really rack your brains about, how is this going to work? So we found ThoughtWorks. We had loads of, long sessions with them, and a very, very committed team there. And our team, the design team, is also, very committed to that. So they worked very hard for 4 years, from 2014 to 18. And then we eventually had this platform by 2018, which we call eDesign, which through a 7-stage process allows a customer who buys a home from us to log in and design, starting with stage 1, which is the wall position. So you actually design the floor plan of your home. So you could have purchased a 3-bedroom apartment with 3 bathrooms from us, but you could actually redesign it to have a home office, or to become a 2-bedroom, or to add a maid's room, or or make some of the rooms larger or smaller, make them, do away with 1 bathroom, or make the kitchen larger, anything. And then in the second stage, you go into every space that you have now closed on, go into every individual space and decide on the furniture layout. How do you want the furniture laid out within that room? And then once you're done with that, then you go into something called the feature enhancement stage, where you then add air conditioning or central vacuum or whatever. And then there's a design studio where you actually select the materials. And then there's functional planning, where you go into every wardrobe or a cabinet and decide on the interior shelves and spacing and drawers and all of that. And then finally you go into the electrical, where you actually select all the switch points, what switch connects with what light point, and things like that. And then the last stage is a store, where you can actually just go to the store and purchase light fixtures or loose furniture items or rugs or vases and things like that. So this whole 7-stage process allows you to completely design your home the way you want it.
This sounds incredible. It also sounds incredibly complex, because every time you move a wall or you add something to it, there are real world implications.
Yes.
Stone, tiles, masonry, structural,
and the MEP as well, the plumbing, electrical, all of that.
Absolutely, all of this, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, in some ways, that answers why most companies don't do that. Like, in fact, it's rare. Like, making typical real estate companies make even the smallest of changes, like adding a few extra switches, which causes extra conduiting, etc. Just like, becomes like this thing.
So all of this is possible with the product approach. Now, if we had hundreds of different home products, it'd be very difficult, right? So when we have a home product and we're repeating it 500 times, then this becomes viable.
So it's When I asked Srikanth Iyer, the founder of Homelane, how he fought through the first few years of absolute chaos at his startup, Srikanth said he focuses on just one thing: understanding what you're bad at. He explains how he learned and applied this very first principle in his career. You spent 13 years at EduRite, and then it was acquired by Pearson, and you spent another year there. That was 14 years in the space of edtech, much before edtech became so popular as it was, and then before, of course, became notorious. What happened after that?
So, actually, we got acquired twice. Acha, by the way, I must tell you, I must have the notoriety of being the only person who sold a business not once, not twice, but 3 times. Let me just explain. Tudor Vista became my customer in 2005. 2007, they made an offer to acquire us. So we merged with Tudor Vista, but I continued as part of the team running the business. Pearson invested in us in 2011 and acquired us fully in 2013. I decided that I will continue by being an employee. I was the CEO for the India business 2013 for about a year and a half, like you said. So they acquired 100% of the business. So that was the second acquisition. Fast forward another 3 years, I had already started Homelane, but 2007, I was still in touch with the Pearson folks and friendly with them, etc. 2017, they decided that they wanted to sell that business for whatever reason.
The one that they acquired.
The one that they acquired, part of the business, not fully, part of it. There were 3 or 4 parts. The one part of it they wanted to sell. And so what happened? They asked me whether I could find somebody. And so in 2017, I found somebody who was none other than Baiju, who acquired that part of the business. So the same business I sold to him, and before that sold to Pearson, and before that sold to Ganesh from Tudor Vista. So stayed with the business for about 14 and a half years. After 14 and a half years, I think I developed some kind of what I call a tech fatigue. I said, you know what, I've struggled with this problem for a long time. I mean, make no mistake, I'm equally happy and proud of some of the innovations that we've done along the way, but I think I wanted to challenge myself with something different. And there were 2 paths in front of me. It was very clear. One was do one more tech, which I knew, and I had some inkling of the market of the business. And then, or do something totally different. I think the attraction of something which was totally uncharted and totally different was very, very too strong for me. And I also felt a genuine consumer need in the home interior space. I didn't see any brand.
How did you come across those? Was this arising from personal experience, or did you have some kind of a method to look at opportunities when you were considering where to go towards?
So there were 3 parts to this. One was about 2 years before I started Homelane. I had gotten up 1 or 2 homes done, had a terrible experience then. I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would go and try and solve this problem. But I just filed it away saying, "Arey yaar, 10-15 lakh rupiya kharcha kar raha hu. I'm still not getting any predictable output here. Why is this so bad? Why can't there be a brand? I can just blindly go sign up and they do everything and, give me the key and I'm happy, they're happy. I'm spending 10 lakhs, I'll spend 11 lakhs. I'm okay with it. But let me at least give me a good outcome." And there was no brand at that time. That was one just filed away. My co-founder came up with this thought saying, you know what? People, when they buy homes, they have to do wardrobes. They have to do kitchens. Why don't we kind of make that a branded play and go and solve that problem? That basically came from him. The third component was I saw that the existing players had not scaled much. Godrej Interior was doing homes. They still do steel kitchens. They do offices, furniture. They do kids' furniture, products, cots, this, that, bunk beds and all of that. There was 500-600 crores of revenue, which I thought for the size of India was very small. I said, there is a play here. The third, then I started doing first-hand research. Because I was in education for so long, I had a lot of contact with builders. Why builders? Because they all ran schools or colleges at some point in time in their life. So I knew many of them. I went and met 3-4 of them. I said, hey, this is the problem statement. Is this problem statement real or am I smoking something? Please tell me, Most of them told me that I am on to something, or at least they felt that I was on to something, saying, there is nobody who's pan-India doing something like this. Then I said, okay, then let me try and solve that problem. And started off with one experience center in Bangalore, near Richmond Circle. And had a lot of learning curves in the first 1 year, but after that, I haven't looked back.
What happened in the first 1 year?
So the first 1 year was very interesting. I had like a very steep learning curve. I thought this was a crying customer need and I was right about it, which means that customers were looking for one neck to catch, one person to solve all the interior problems, somebody who will do plumbing and carpentry and electrical and flooring and everything, painting.
And each
all
of these means that there are 10 different things that can go wrong.
Different skills of blue-collared workers. I said, yaar, ye to ho sakta hai. Why not? And we started taking orders. Chappad fadke orders we were getting. We got like first few months.
So you raised some angel funding?
We raised angel funding. Sequoia was there. Aaron Capital, we raised Series A of $4.5 million. That time came to 27 crores. This was 2015, early 2015. 6 months after we started, pretty much. Not too long. So great, fantastic stuff. Very happy. Orders flowing in. And then I realized that this was the most difficult in terms of execution. I mean, every different skill you add, the execution complexity goes up exponentially. It doesn't go up linearly. And I said, man, this is what have I landed myself into. I wanted to set right the industry and make customer experience better. I was doing exactly the opposite. The experience that we were giving to our customers was worse than what they would have got with carpenters. And I said, this is exactly the worst thing that can happen. And I pretty much went into some sort of a depression for some time because I said, and I couldn't even know how to solve the problem. We used to get requests like saying, my son loves music. You're making a cot for us. Can you make the cot in the shape of a piano? I didn't know where to start. But that order has already been taken now by my sales guy. Now I have to execute that order. What I thought would take us 2 weeks used to take us 3 months and cost me 2x of what I thought it would cost. So first of all, I was not making money. Second of all, I had a very severely unhappy customer. By the way, I've always taken Net Promoter Score from our customers from day one because I said, if I'm going to change the game, I have to measure if I'm changing the game or not. So I used to take NPS. NPS was minus 27. And that's the first time I knew that NPS could be negative. I thought 0 was the worst that you could go to. And anyway, so I was flummoxed, basically. And then I chanced upon this book, Rohin. I chanced upon this book called Uncommon Service. It's a HBS authored book by this lady professor called Frances Frey. She's right now on the global board of WeWork currently. But she used to teach at Harvard then. And she's written this book along with one more person. And the book is very clear. It says, if you are in the service delivery business, you cannot be great at everything that you do. Meaning, you can't give the best price and the best service and the best quality and the best timing. And if you try to do everything the best, at best you will be mediocre at everything. That's the premise. So it says, pick couple of things that are very important to your customer and also pick couple of things where you necessarily will be bad at. Because unless you're bad at 2 things, you'll never be great at a couple of things which really matter to your customer. So if you think that you can be average at this, very good at something and fantastic at something else, it won't happen. You have to necessarily be, so the theory is, you necessarily need to be bad at something in your business.
Or at least understand what you will be.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Does it mean that once you know what you're bad at, you can afford to ignore it and say no to it? Is that the precursor?
No. So I'll tell you what it translated for me. It translated that I need to give something up to become and good and or valuable to my customers. What did I start the business for? Which I told you in the beginning, right? I wanted to offer predictability, predictable quality, budget, most importantly, timeline. So I had in fact come up with this thing saying 45 days I will give your home back to you. Otherwise, I'll pay you rent for every day of delay. That was my promise to the customer. So I said, if I have to be great at predictability, I need to pick what I want to be bad at. And what I needed to be bad at to be predictable was variety. Because variety was the enemy of predictability in my business. Or rather, variety was the enemy of scale also. When I'm saying enemy, I'm being a bit harsh, but you know what I'm getting. So, I started pruning down the services that we were offering. Flooring, no. Civil, no. We still don't do it. 8 years later, we still don't do civil and flooring and plumbing. We don't do. Because it's a very different skill. I said, I can take the order. I will get the order also, but I'll never be able to execute it. So that needs to be, and that's not scalable. And I didn't want to do something in Jayanagar, Bangalore. I want to do something across the country. If I can't do it, I don't want to do it at all. So that was so A, be clear of what you don't want to do. B, we came up with what we call a finite catalog philosophy, which is similar to what you'll see in the IKEAs of the world. Like Mr. Henry Ford said, I'll give you whatever color you want as long as it's black. We said, okay, that's a good place to start from. If the whole world offers 2,000 color options of laminate, which you stick on the wood when you get the finish, I said, I'll offer 50 colors. I said, 50 colors is a lot. Why do people want 2,000 colors? And 2,000 colors is going to make my supply chain so complicated, my dependence on external suppliers so high that it's bound to fail. It is bound to fail. So I said, I will only have 50 colors. And for every color, I'll have minimum of 2 suppliers. Minimum. So my criteria for choosing a color is minimum 2 suppliers hai kya iska? So in a way, that 45 days became our North Star. And said, if I can't deliver anything in 45 days, I don't want to offer the service at all. So to go back to your Swan question, I know it's been a longish answer, but the point is, I really had to decide if I had to say no to revenue or not. And being a startup and a funded startup as that is not the easiest decision to make. But that is the tough call that we took. We said, we won't do certain things. And even in the things that we do, we will offer functionality and predictability far greater than variety and infinite customization. I mean, go think about the chord in the shape of a piano customization. No, not going to do that. And that became, so in other words, like we were chatting earlier today, right? If you buy a modular kitchen from us, the modular kitchen basically is a set of boxes which are put together in your kitchen. We have 300 shapes of boxes, of the core shapes of boxes in the kitchen. Now that can be assembled in any combination, which is almost infinite. But 301 shape I will not give. And that is controlled completely on our platform. So that's the real hard call that we took, saying we will do what we otherwise call finite catalog or mass customization. We will do customization, but at a mass scale within a certain framework, which allows us to take advantage of the economies of scale. So I can give you one more example of this, not in our industry, but some other industry who have been very good at this, being bad at something to be great at something. Indigo Airlines. Fantastic example, right? They started the last. Today, they are the clear market leaders. From day one, they've been very clear. They never ever have had a business class seat in their life. They said, you want business class, go buy some other. I'm not giving you. They were also very, very clear that the food that they serve in the flight is not based on how good it tastes or how bad it tastes. It is based on how fast they can serve you and then take it back from you. Believe it or not, even the packaging is thought through so much that why? Because they said we have to be great at one thing, and that's getting from point A to point B on time better than anybody else in the industry.
So everything else comes down to turnaround time and the
I don't
ability.
mind being bad at food. I don't mind being, even if you take the friendliness in the aircraft when you go in. I mean, I'm sure we've all used Indigo. We don't have a choice, right? 60-65% is Indigo Airlines. They're not the friendliest crew that you will come across. I mean, if you just think about it, they are business-like. But that's the projection that they want you to have also. Because they don't want it to be over-friendly, ki I'll do whatever you want, don't worry, No, I have to get on time. They're not curt, but they're kind of borderline there. I'm saying all this in a positive way because they're very clear that nothing else matters other than getting from point A to point B. So it's a huge inspiration for somebody like us. Next time you go on an Indigo flight, also you notice when you go in, the music that they play is far more calming and soothing. When they land, the pace of the music quickens because they want you to get the hell out of there as fast as possible because they want to turn around in 25 minutes compared to 45 minutes of the airline. So that again was a big inspiration saying, you know what, you need to necessarily be bad at something. They don't serve you coffee, Indigo Airlines, in a 30-minute flight. Every other airline, you can cajole them to give you something, some coffee or tea. These guys won't. They say, sorry, I can give you water. Take it or leave it. So they're clear that they'll be bad at something in the service of being great at being on time, which is fantastic. So,
and really, it's the acceptance of this as an entrepreneur and as a company that it comes down to, right? I think we can all, we all implicitly know that there are things that we are bad at, that our organizations are bad at.
Yeah.
But it's the ability to accept that.
Correct.
And to actually make it part of your culture and to own it. So how did that happen at Homelane?
So two things, right? What you said, and I'll just put it in a different way. The first thing is to look at the mirror and say, you can't be everything that your customer wants you to be. You are...
Which is hard in a country like India because there is this thing of the customer is always right in some senses, right?
Yes, he is. But delivering to every customized need is
a fool's errand.
Let's take your business. I'll just take an example of your business. There are multiple media formats that are there. There are multiple niches that are there that you can go after. But you've chosen a niche of saying, I'll be contemporary. I will talk about big businesses, small businesses. I will specialize in startups. I will come up with news and something that's helpful.
And we will only do one story a day.
You will do only one story a day. Now, that is a statement because, again, you cannot be everything that everybody wants you to be. It's very similar for us. Very similar for us. Customers would want everything from you, but you have to decide what is it that you are going to stand for and hope like hell that the customer is going to want to come to you for that. And thankfully for us, it worked.
So it's embracing your constraints and essentially
making it a strength.
Making it a strength.
So then, okay. So the second part of your question, which I didn't answer, was how could I do this across the org? Okay, today we are 2,200 people. That time we were some 200 people maybe. Even 200 people is a lot of people. How do you get them to see? Which is how this quantification of 45 days became very important for me. Because it became a number. See, I always say, good quality, great quality. It's English, right? Nobody's going to tell you they're going to give you average quality. Everybody's going to tell you great quality. They'll give you on budget. Everybody will say, I'll give you on budget. Who's going to say, Acha, no, there will be a variance? Nobody's going to say it. The only thing where I could really thump the table and quantify was on timeline. Think about it, right? You can't quantify anything else. So that's when I said, in fact, I became a little over-aggressive. The first 3 months, I said 30 days or we pay you rent. And we paid a lot of rent. But then I realized that it was not the 30 days or it was not the quantum that mattered. It was the predictability that was far more important than the quantum. You say 60 also, but you say 60 and give it in 60. So that's when we moved from 30 to 45 and we have stuck to 45. So for my entire team, it became a rallying cry saying that kuch bhi ho jaye, every project has to be delivered in 45 days or under. It was a simple North Star metric. I know that it's easier said than how are you going to deliver it? And that is a different...
But there's a certain beauty to it because then when you tell people in the organization that these are the things that we will not do, they're able to draw a straight line from not doing it
To 45 days.
being 45 days.
Correct. So that became, I lost half my designers the first day I decided that I will go from 1,000 laminates to 50 laminates. 50% of them resigned. First day. I said, no, I'm...
Reason being
I
because
said, yaar, pagal aadmi hai, computer science engineer, pata nahi kya kar raha hai. He doesn't know what he's doing in interior design. Who's going to buy from you if you give 50 colors? Nobody will buy. I said, I'm going to offer 45 days. Nobody is offering 45 days today. I will offer 45 days. And I believe that my customer, my TG, will choose 45 days over 1,000 colors. That was my bet, basically. And it worked. I mean, it still is working.
Shan Kadaval of Fresh to Home cracked a really tough business in a super competitive market. And then he evolved as a CEO and a leader. He talks about scaling a 40 employee organization to a 4,000 employee organization, encouraging his team to be their own CEO, obsessing over the right metrics, and much more. What's your definition of success when you were in your 20s? What was your definition of success when you were in your 20s?
So, if you reflect back and I can, and when I thought about it then, the definition of success at that point of time was to be, rich and famous and so on, right? It was like everybody else. As I became older, the definition of success has changed quite a bit, right?
What is it today?
So today it's really about figuring out impact. Now, whether it's an impact, and it still can have a monetary aspect to it. It could be impact in terms of a return to a shareholder, but it is also impact to, the community or the system. I'll give you a very tangible example. I don't want to be preachy. So I had all the options in the world to be in San Francisco, to be in the US, and I was doing gaming companies. There was Zynga was the largest IPO in the Valley, right, after Google. But I wanted to come back to India. One, I missed my fish curry and rice, but more importantly, I also wanted to be with something that my parents and my family could see that impact. Like my dad and mom and all have relocated back here. They can see and relate to what I'm doing there, right? If I'm in support.com or in the early days when I was doing...
Success is tangible as opposed to abstract.
That's correct.
So what you're saying is that people here saying that, oh, my son Shan, he's in the US, he works for this tech company, he's really successful, but beyond that, you don't really like... And
you might be, and even beyond that, like if you're developing something on crypto with Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff peppered in, it's hard to explain that to my dad. It's hard to explain that to a normal
I would
person.
argue it's hard to explain to anyone, but let's leave it there.
Yeah. And then actually I had this entrepreneur pitch me that crypto is like TCP/IP and all that stuff. But I'll leave that stuff. But and then secondly, when I actually physically met Matthew the first time, I was sold. Not because of the business in general, because I didn't know how the business would pan out. It was really that life that he was doing, directly interacting with the fish. It's hard life. It is really, really, really hard life. It was enjoyable. Like you speak to these people there. So the problems that I've had to deal with in my corporate life is, am I going to get 7% raise this year or 15% raise this year? Can I solve attrition problem here? What is the bell curve and all that stuff? Here, people are actually working out, well, can I get 2 square meals during the 2 months when there is a trawling season? It is an incredibly hard set of problems you're solving. And once you get into that problem, and that problem can also be a business, which earlier I could not do, it is quite invigorating, right? And it is very, very different from what I've done before, and I love it for that.
How do you manage to still keep in touch with that aspect of problem solving once your organization, Fresh to Home, has become so big? Because now you will be spending most of your time, whether you like it or not, on the bell curve and on retention and on attrition, etc., right?
Actually, to be fair, we haven't spent too much time on that. The reason being is that the way that we have organized the company, and something that I've learned from Zynga, is that we have organized the company so that each person is a CEO for his or her own areas, right? And I'll just give you a very specific example. So, for example, we've got 70% of our time that is doing day-to-day stuff. We then have something called as FTH Labs, which is 30% of people's time. And you as a CEO, which, in each unit, there would be a CEO. So if you're, let's say, a Delhi GM, then the GM would be the CEO for that particular area.
Are you organized? Is your leadership organized geographically,
It's all
functionally?
Geographically. We do have functional leadership, but it's all separate teams, because if you had 4,000 people, it's very hard to organize that separately. And each P&L is owned directly by the geo head, right? And also by the other people there. So people truly imbibe this whole be your CEO. Now, last year was difficult, right? Last year was difficult, not because of us in particular, but the ecosystem was difficult. We did have, and most people saw the year before in 2021, salaries were through the roof. There was a lot of attrition. We saw zero attrition. Materially, we have zero attrition in our management team, and it's because of the way we have structured it ourselves. I mean, we are not flashy individuals, as the co-founders, probably because of the number of gray hair that we have. But in general, people feel part of the whole family. They have their own targets. They don't get micromanaged. And they, a very interesting way in which we set goals is they set the goals themselves, and then they propagate it downward, back up. So we have OKRs. Those OKRs are not top down.
Since when have you been running OKRs?
Since the time that Mark introduced it, way back in Zynga in 2000.
So that means you've had OKRs at Fresh to Home almost since inception?
The cultural DNA is very similar to Zynga. So there was a time when we were like 20 people sitting in a small chocolate factory back in San Francisco. And we were doing, I guess, $5-10 million of revenue. And then number of games, especially Farmville, grew to be large hits. In 2 years, I think we hit more than $1 billion+ of revenue. Farmville alone was $1 billion+ revenue. And there was no way to scale a company of 20, 50 people back to 3,000, 4,000 people in 2 years' time without this kind of a organization. So we've been doing, the be your own CEOs, which essentially means two things. One, you have to set goals. Those goals have to be bottoms up. So the CEOs themselves and their teams, who are also CEOs, have to bring up those goals and propagate it upsells. They have to commit to it, and versus the company forcing it down their throat.
Give me an example of.
An example would be, for example, if you're in, let's say, a particular geo, you would have two of your goals that are related to running the company, right? In a steady state fashion, like revenue, retention, or whatever that goals is. And you will get 100%, and these OKRs are tied to compensation. Otherwise, it's very hard to sort of do that. And then you will get 100% of your pay if you hit these two mainstream ones. But the system will force you to do another two. So there are total 4 OKRs. And then you would get 140 or 200% or 160% of your pay if you hit those. Now, those are stretch goals. These are moonshots. And these moonshots, you're free to do. And you're also free not to do it. And then you can be a steady performer who achieves what your first two out of 4. Examples of these moonshots for us was contract farming. So, for example, when we originally started, we only started marine fish and auctions. We didn't have a way of getting into the contract farming. Now, contract farming is about 30% of our overall volume, operates at 60% gross margins, and it's a great new business, right? We've also done similar stuff across the board.
And this was something that came up as a moonshot bet.
But by the team, not by me or not by the management team. It was not a top-down push. And across the board, we have these moonshot bets. And this is great in good times. But it works the best when things are bad, right? When the ecosystem is bad, and I've heard a number of colleagues go through this in the last sort of 2 years or so, 1.5 years or so, right? The team is very cohesive. They stay with you. It is, for them, it's not just a company to work for a pay, because they are getting to define rules. And it has got goods and bads. If you don't do it well, you could leave dead bodies running, and that's possible. There could be friction centrally. This could be between the geos. All of those things are side effects of not doing it properly. But it is an area where you could see a huge amount of growth if you have the right people, and the wrong people will leave over a period of time on their own, right?
That was my next question. That culturally, how do you deal? While it's all right to say that you can be as ambitious as you want or as stable as you want, often what also happens in organizations is that, let's say, someone who's chosen to execute on 2 stretch goals and achieves it and is rewarded for it, it can lead to resentment in other people who may not have chosen to kind of do that, and therefore, but at the end of the day, and that leads to cultural
It does not if it is transparent. So our OKRs are in a single sheet that is visible to everybody. So unlike other places, OKR reviews are not private. If you the way you set the OKRs and you review it is publicly available to everybody. This is again something that I had started in Zynga. We would hire young product managers, out of business unit. Lots of different places. Give them like $5 or $10 million of P&L to run with, and they swim or sink. And it's very Darwinian in nature in the sense that because the results are very public, there is no sense of resentment because everybody else knows what somebody else has performed, right? And that Darwinian nature can be good and bad, but when it's good, it really works and the company becomes very cohesive. And I've seen that across 10, 15 years right now, right? Where I've run multiple of my companies in the same way.
An extension of this, what kind of a person is likely to succeed at Fresh to Home?
So the person that would be likely to be succeeding in Fresh to Home is somebody who knows that the larger game is going to be longer term, and somebody who also understands that short-term flashiness, right? Whether it's 3 times a meal in a day, which interestingly enough I had introduced in Zynga, Michelin chef and all that stuff, or others don't matter in the grand scheme of things, right? And they have to look at it from a bigger picture where they will grow with the company, but they have to be entrepreneurial. So if you're not entrepreneurial, if you're not ready to take a risk, and most of our folks that we hire have been previous entrepreneurs themselves, and people who are ready to try and fail, but fail fast. Like you can't try 6 months to a year to get an idea of to be failure. We'll look at it in 3 months or 6 months time. You either make it or you break it. There is also the kind of people who join Fresh to Home are people who are okay with chaos. We don't have, despite our 7 years, in this thing, we are still very chaotic, right? There is no fixed rules, there's no process. There is unlikely that you will find a very structured orientation. You will have to figure out this yourself. But on the flip side, you'll get huge amount of independence. So much independence that it'll scare you, right? You will essentially be the CEO of that unit, but you will be gauged based on that. If you're not able to deliver results, you will automatically have peer pressure and you will leave on your own. And that's typically how it works.
What's your best kept secret about finding talented people? Because you did say earlier that one of the most important things for an entrepreneur is finding people.
So at least people who have gone through a interview session with me would find me asking things like why did 1,000 monkeys cross the puzzle and things like that. But even at sort of senior VP level people, I would make them write some code if they are in engineering, of course not in sales or the others, and I would go through the code myself with them. Some people will get perplexed by it. The idea is not for them to be hands-on, but the people that I expect to work on should get into the weeds and get into what's going on, right? And I expect my head of sales, who unfortunately may not understand SQL and may not be able to do it, still be able to poke around, understand what's exactly going on behind the scenes, go to the numbers. I expect my product managers to be extremely hands-on at a lower level, measure every aspect of, the cur, nar, or rar. These are how I measure retention. So being hands-on and being your own CEO, which all boils down, is a core part of what I look in people. And you would hear that very strongly from people who worked with me. I'm also a people's person in the sense, at the end of the day, my relationship with people goes whether they are with us or without us. And I always make sure that we stay connected in some shape or fashion. It might be some small gesture, and I value that a lot.
Do you have any great open-ended questions that you ask people during interviews?
I do ask a lot of open-ended questions. I typically ask creativity questions.
Give us examples.
An example, I typically ask about, you have a large aircraft that you've just stolen mid-air, and you are asked to find the weight of this aircraft. And you can't use traditional weighing balances because weighing balances would break. And then you got to figure this out. So it's fascinating to see how different people approach this
problem solving, unstructured problems.
Unstructured problem solving are the key elements that I like to gauge people on, and it's fascinating because I have seen amazing responses, and I continue to be getting new ideas. Right, the last one was somebody who told me that just like you are able to find the way to the baby in the mom's womb using a ultrasound, why don't we do an ultrasound of the whole aircraft? So it's just fascinating what people come up with. I like those great ideas. I like those energy flows. That's really what keeps us energized. We do know as co-founders that we know that we've gone through many of these ideas, and we can only get growth if we figure out how to kill our current stable business with something else that will be new in the same domain. Hopefully we don't kill it too drastically. So we always look out for those ideas.
So you're looking for creativity, problem solving, and hands-on execution.
That's correct.
And I'm connecting it back to that earlier theme you talked about, being your own CEO and independence and chaos. So essentially, if I put all of these together, you're essentially looking for people who are self-directed, creative, or also who are entrepreneurs. Yeah, you kind of describing many of the things which are essentially entrepreneurs.
We're looking at entrepreneurs. That's what we do.
What's your span of control? How many people report to you?
I don't have. I'm first among the equals with the co-founders, so they don't report to me, but they report to me essentially. But beyond that, I don't have anybody reporting to me.
So the co-founders are all, I'm assuming, functional leads in different areas.
Yeah. So we've got somebody who's handling. I don't, but yet I'm omnipresent in in this whole system. But I don't have people reporting to me beyond that.
Do you believe you are, should be, can be replaceable at your company?
Absolutely, we should be at any point in time. But at the same time, I've seen the script play out in multiple different companies, right? So in any companies where I've seen the founder CEO being replaced before market product maturity is met, it leads to absolute chaos. I've seen that across my first company. I've seen that across multiple different companies. So
how would you define market product maturity?
So I think in our scenarios, it would be to be fully profitable and essentially EBITDA profitable, and also seeing a stable growth rate going forward.
So once that is reached, you're saying that
you have to then figure out a corporate CEO to be able to scale you to the next level.
Is there a time when CEO should think about stepping back?
I think a CEO should think about stepping back when you're not growing fast enough, or when you're not able to hit the shareholders' needs for that, right? And you have to be cognizant of that, because at the end of the day, you as a CEO have got X amounts of time and opportunities, and you've tried that. And at that point of time, if it's not leading to a success, you have to be fair to the shareholders, right? And your stakeholders in general.
How do you balance that with something that you said earlier, which is, say it's a company which has yet to achieve market maturity fit.
Yeah.
And it's also a CEO who hasn't grown the company fast enough.
So I think
so would a new CEO be able to be because then you still have that risk that the new CEO is inheriting an organization which is still not in many ways mature enough to scale, right?
The most important thing is to make sure that you have enough people who can call the emperor naked, right? And you need to know that whether the company is not hitting those milestones because inherently it's a hard enough problem and you pitched a different idea back to investors, it will never work. Or is this market going to take a longer time and is a different execution approach that is there? If it is the latter, of course, you need to get somebody else who can execute better than you. If it's the former, you got to figure out, pivot, find new ideas and so on. And I'm fortunate with my co-founders who can call the emperor naked anytime in the thing. And I'm also fortunate to have a board who is essentially quite supportive in that regard, right? And managing the board is also equally an important function of the CEO. And the board has to be honest with you. In good times, you don't need a board, right? It's there to pat your backs and say good things and, have good dinners and so on. But when in bad times, and especially when you're in the trenches, that's when you need a board. And I've seen that happen across my career, right? For all the sort of, success that you would see, almost every year, there would be the cliffhanger moment when you have only 2 months of runway remaining. You will have to figure out options, or you'll have to figure out various different things. And that's going to happen to you. And regardless of whatever you tell externally, that is a reality of being an entrepreneur. And the only people who can support you at that point is, beyond your family and everybody else, is either your co-founders, because they are there to share you, and the board. And so it's important for you to be very honest with the board versus using them to pitch them. And, pitching stops the moment they enter your company as a board member. And then it's best to give them only the bad stuff, because that's the only area that they can help you with, right? The good stuff is, you can give it as a general email and others that they can continue to praise you and take credit for it and all that stuff. But reality is that it happens only when you start sharing that kind of, bad news with them. And I'm going back to your old question. The moment you have that board and you have that co-founders or others who can tell you that you're not really doing it, and it's not because of macro reasons or because of idea reasons or pivot reasons, it's because of execution, that's the point you should quit.